you have to keep in mind that this Bible that we have before us, this biblical text, was not written in English or in any of the other many languages, over 3,000 languages into which it has been translated today, but it is a Hebrew book. It was written in Hebrew and only later was it translated. I rate this book personally 5 stars, and I want to congratulate you on the effort that went into writing that book, which I believe is one of the must-reads for those in our audience today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Blizzard, but none of this would be possible if it weren't for your input in my life. And the book records for posterity some of the teachings and some of the information that Dr. Blizzard has shared with me. For example, we start off by talking about Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Now, a lot of people who are taught from Sunday school level about the creation of man still have this picture of a man and a woman running naked through the Garden of Eden, and that God created this man and this woman, and their names were called Adam and Eve. But you taught me different, didn't you? So why don't you share some of that with the viewers today?
Well, let me start by sharing something else with our listeners. This is a book entitled Onkelos on the Torah. And it is one of the most valuable books that I have in my library. Actually, it's just one of 5. Because this is a translation of the biblical text into Aramaic that is still used in Rabbinic Judaism until today. And this book, as you can see, I have it opened here, was written by 2 very well-known Israeli or Hebrew scholars, both rabbis, Rabbi Israel Drazen and Rabbi Clarence Wagner. And you have here the Hebrew text, the basic Hebrew text. Then you have the Aramaic translation. Then you have translation of the Aramaic, showing the differences from the Hebrew to the Aramaic. Then you have a commentary. Then you have Rashi's commentary, who was also a very, very well-known, famous rabbinic scholar. And then you have statements such as this one that I wish to make. Before I make that statement, I want to preface it with this for those of you who are watching us and listening to this program today. With this statement, you have to keep in mind that this Bible that we have before us, this biblical text, was not written in English or in any of the other many languages, over 3,000 languages into which it has been translated today, but it is a Hebrew book. It was written in Hebrew and only later was it translated. And so, as difficult a burden as it places upon us, and I know that it does, if you want to know what this document actually says, you have to know the Hebrew, or you have to be able to work with the Hebrew text. And it's not all that difficult to do, and I can tell you quite easily how you can do it, but you have to know that this is a Hebrew text, and the Hebrew text does not say the same thing that the English text says. And I'm going to quote now from these rabbis who have written this book for us. They say, would we be considered irreverent? This is on page number 15. Would we be considered irreverent if we suggested that the entire biblical story of the creation of humankind and their sin in the Garden of Eden is an allegory? That is a story that reveals a truth which is embedded in the text, which need not be taken literally. Could Adam and Eve be humankind? The Garden of Eden, the world as it could be if we only hearken to God's commands. The snake, the variety of temptations in life which draws away from serving God. And the sin of Adam and Eve, the choices we have the power to make, and the punishment and inevitable consequence of sin. Now, why would they say such a thing? For the simple reason that when you read the Hebrew text in Genesis chapter 1, it says, and God created Adam. And that word, Adam, is a Hebrew word that in this context it simply refers to mankind. It's not talking about that God created a man that looks like we do and called his name Adam. It means that he created something that he called Adam. And in order to understand more about the meaning of that word, you have to know something about the nature of the Hebrew language itself. And you have to know that in that passage, and that passage is in Genesis chapter 1, let's have a look at it and see just exactly what it does say. It says, in verse 27, and the Lord created Adam. Vayivra Elohim, in verse 27. Et ha'adam b'tsalmo b'tselem Elohim bara oto. And here's something that's often missed. Zachar u'nekeva bara otam. Male and female created he them. And if you go to Genesis chapter 5, from here, just go directly to chapter 5 in verse 1. Just to show you something here very quickly. It says, Bra'am v'yivarech oto otam, vayikra et shmam Adam. B'yom hibaram. It says that this is the book, starting with verse 1, of the generations of Adam in the day that God created Adam b'dmut Elohim, in the image of God, asa oto, zachar u'nekeva, male and female, bra'am, v'yivarech otam, v'yikra et shmam Adam. He created them male and female, and called their name Adam, so that the name of mankind was Adam, and it referred both to the male and to the female. So it's not as if God is creating someone who looks like us. Here's Adam here, and here's Eve over here, and now we have Adam and Eve out streaking through the Garden of Eden. That's not what is implied in the Hebrew text.
So Roy, I think it's really interesting to see the way the Hebrew differs from the English, but I'm sure listeners out there are interested in why it comes to mean what it means. And the secret in this, or the answer to this, lies in understanding Hebrew. And the Hebrew language has a way of expressing certain ideas that in English we're really not aware of. So if you could explain to the listeners exactly how that word Adam comes to mean something other than Adam, the name or the guy that we've been imagining since Sunday school days.
Well, let's look at what it says here in Genesis chapter 2 now. And this is starting with verse number 7. It says, Vayitzer Adonai Elohim et Adam afar min ha'adamah vayipach ba'apav nishmat chayim vayihi ha'adam lenefesh chaya. It says, and the Lord God, now in this particular usage of the word here, it's a usage of the word that he formed or he made. At the very beginning of creation, it's Breshit bara. Bara means create out of pre-existent materials, where Yatsar means to take and to form something out of material that's already been created. And he says that he formed him from the dust of the ground, and he breathed in his nostrils the breath of life, and Adam became a thing alive. And the interesting thing is that you'd almost have to see this on a board, that the root of the word Adam is, as you know, Dam. Just Dam. Every word in Hebrew has a root or a stem form. And the stem or the root form of Adam is Dam, which means blood. And as you look at how this progresses, you have Vayitzer Adonai et Ha'adam afar min ha'adamah. And Adamah has the same root. It's the root of Dam as well. Adam Adamah, and it's talking about that he breathes into his nostrils the breath of life, and Adam becomes a thing alive. And this thing is so rich, so expressive and full of meaning that it's almost beyond comprehension of how this is being formed and developed here in Hebrew. But God is forming Adam from the minute particles, if you will, of the totality of all that God is. And then he breathes into his nostrils that portion of himself, and man becomes a thing just like God.
So, did God create blood, or how does the root dam become the man or the thing that God created?
Well, let's turn to this book here and have a look. This book is called Bereshit, which is the Ashkenazi pronunciation for Bereshit, which is the Hebrew word for Genesis. And this book here is an important book for you to have in your library. It's the Art Scroll Tanakh series published by Mesorah, and this is volume 1 of 2 volumes, and it is a very important work for you to have again in your library that gives the definition and meaning of a lot of these words. And we're looking here at page 69, where it says, Adam, man, is a general term for mankind as a whole, as evidenced in 5 and 2, to which we referred. The term applies to both the male and the female, and he called their name Adam. And then it goes on and talks some about the etymology of the word. And I want to take a moment and turn and find something else here for you. Take a look at this, Stuart. This is on page number 91. It says the word Adam, man, is derived from Adamah, earth, from which he was taken, or is derived from dam, blood, for man is flesh and blood, which means that the root of the word was dam. And what this is saying to us is that something is happening here that is much greater dimension than what we conceive in thinking of someone who looks like us. Here's Adam over here, here's Eve over here, out there streaking through the Garden of Eden. This is much more dynamic, that something is occurring here, that God is making us into something like himself. And our purpose for being is to be the image and the reflection here on this earth of what God is.
So every letter in Hebrew and every root has a meaning. And Dam, Dalet, Mem is the root the root from which the word Adam is formed, but Adam is spelled Aleph, Dalet, Mem. So what does the Aleph mean?
Aleph, interestingly enough, and you can look this up to confirm it, in something like Strong's Concordance, for example, Aleph just by itself stands for, or is an abbreviation for Elohim, for God.
So Elohim, blood, what God is creating,
The blood of God.
the blood of Elohim.
Yes.
So the first creature that was created was really called the blood of Elohim.
But why blood? Because life is in the blood. So man becomes a thing alive, a thing just like God.
So Adam is not just Adam. It is something very, very much more than that. And as we look into the Hebrew text, we discover by dissecting the words, as it were, and going to the root and going to the prefix, we discover that God created something much more dynamic than simply the man that we know as Adam. And we're going to look on in the next segment to what God did next, and it is just as exciting. So, Roy, thank you so much for sharing that. We will get on to what is woman, and I'm sure all the guys want to know what that is.